All right, let's dive into a topic that has gone from the counterculture to the cutting edge of medicine. We're talking about the science of psychedelics.
For decades, when you thought of these compounds, you probably pictured the 1960s. That association led to a major legal crackdown that basically put a freeze on all the research. But now, that's all changing. A whole new wave of science is revealing their incredible potential. And a lot of people think we're on the brink of a revolution in how we treat mental health.
To really get a handle on this, let's go back to the very beginning, to the word itself. Back in 1956, the term psychedelic was created. It literally means mind manifesting, which is a pretty perfect description for drugs that have such a powerful effect on our consciousness. And that's exactly what we're going to get into.
So, first things first, what are we actually talking about when we use the word psychedelics? Because it's definitely not just one thing.
Yeah, psychedelics are not a single substance. They're actually a super diverse group of chemicals. Some come from nature, like psilocybin from magic mushrooms, while others, like LSD, were created in a lab. The big thing to remember here is that their origins are just as varied as their effects. So you've got these compounds that have been used for literally thousands of years in spiritual practices, right alongside substances that were born in a modern laboratory. This incredible diversity is a huge part of the story.
Okay, so we know what they are, but what actually happens when someone takes one? Let's follow that journey from the moment of ingestion all the way to the effect it has on the brain.
Let's use psilocybin as our example here. It's what's known as a prodrug, which is a fancy way of saying that the stuff you actually eat is totally inert. It's your liver that does all the work, acting like a little chemical factory that transforms it into the active molecule, psilocin. And that conversion process? That's why there's a bit of a delay before you start to feel anything.
Once that conversion gets going, the effects kick in pretty fast. You're typically feeling the onset in under an hour, and the peak of the experience usually hits around the 90-minute mark. After that, there's a plateau, and then things gradually wind down. Within about 6 to 8 hours, the main experience is pretty much over.
Okay, now for the really cool part. Let's go inside the brain. What is actually happening on a biological level that creates these incredibly profound experiences? This is where the science gets absolutely fascinating. It's not like one single switch gets flipped. The effects are happening across multiple scales all at once, from the tiniest molecules all the way up to huge brain networks. So let's start small, at the molecular level, and work our way up. Everything that comes next, all the wild changes to consciousness and perception, it all begins with one tiny, tiny chemical interaction. It really comes down to a key and a lock. Psychedelics are the key, and they fit perfectly into a very specific lock in the brain, a serotonin receptor called the 5-HT2A receptor. This is the absolute crucial first step. If that key doesn't turn in that lock, nothing else happens. So the key is in the lock and the door has been opened. What happens next? Well, now we zoom out a little to the cellular level, and we see how that initial spark starts a much bigger fire. This part is just incredible. That first chemical connection actually causes our brain cells to physically change. They literally start to grow new connections between each other. These things are called dendritic spines. And get this, it's not a temporary thing. Studies have shown that a single dose can increase the number of these connections for at least a month.
All right, so we've got our brain cells busy building new bridges between each other. What does that look like on the grand scale, for the brain's entire communication system? Well, it leads to this really profound shift in brain activity. Psychedelics tend to quiet down a major brain highway called the default mode network. You can think of this as the brain's me network. It's what's active when we're thinking about ourselves, our past, our future. By turning the volume down on that network, psychedelics can lead to an experience called ego dissolution, that feeling of your sense of self melting away and feeling deeply connected to everything around you.
So that's the how. Now, let's talk about the why. Why is all this science, this ability to basically rewire the brain, getting so many people excited about the future of mental health care? I want to start with just one number, one really powerful number from a landmark study, 80%. So where does that 80% figure come from? It's from a study of patients with advanced cancer who were facing, as you can imagine, incredible anxiety and depression. After just a single high dose of psilocybin, a staggering 80% of them saw huge, lasting improvements. I mean, in a field where progress is often slow and incremental, these kinds of results are a potential game changer. And these benefits stuck around, lasting for more than 6 months. And it's not just for end-of-life care. A recent study put psilocybin head-to-head against a common daily antidepressant for major depression, and what they found was that both groups got better, but the trend actually leaned in favor of the psilocybin group. Now, the study was small, so the difference wasn't technically statistically significant, but it strongly suggests that the therapeutic benefit is at least as good as our current treatments, and maybe even better. So, with all of this incredibly promising data coming in, where does the field go from here? Well, the path forward is both really exciting and, frankly, pretty complicated. First off, scientists have to deal with this major paradox. On one hand, in the US, psilocybin is a Schedule I drug, which legally means it has no accepted medical use. But on the other hand, the FDA has given it breakthrough therapy status, which is a special designation that acknowledges its amazing promise and speeds up the review process. It's a strange situation to be in.
And boy, are there still a ton of questions to answer. Scientists are trying to figure out things like, are the therapeutic effects really tied to that 5-HT2A receptor, or is it another one? What's the real story with microdosing? Do those new brain connections strengthen specific useful pathways? There's just so much more to learn.
And this all leads us to the final and maybe biggest question of all. You could call it the holy grail of this research. Is it possible to engineer new drugs that can give us all those incredible brain rewiring benefits we've been talking about, but without the intense, often challenging psychedelic trip? That's the billion-dollar question that is driving the next generation of this science.